Good morning, everybody. 2 down, 2 to go. Thank you for joining this morning's Yes Speaker series featuring a talk by Kelly Small, who's going to enlighten us a little bit about design ethics for the real world. My name is Anna Rita Mores, and I'm the chair for the School of Design here at George Brown College, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's talk. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that George Brown College is on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and other Indigenous people who have lived here over time. We're grateful to share this land as treaty people who learn, work, and live in a community with each other. Across the School of Design, we remain committed to identifying and removing systemic barriers to accessing college programs and services, and are committed to working towards strategies, tools, and actions to better support our Indigenous student population. Now, in a commitment to build connections and opportunities for students to engage with design's visionaries, YES features a week-long lecture series. The design-focused speaker series has been cultivated in an effort to provide dynamic perspectives and unique discussion opportunities for members of our community, including students and faculty alike. Honest advice for designers from really good designers connects the School of Design with those who've impacted the industry on a local and global scale through a focused thematic-based lecture. This is followed by an opportunity for conversation and dialogue using the YouTube chat, so please feel free to relay all of your questions for Kelly there. Before I introduce Kelly, I wanted to take a moment for a quick giveaway because we know that designers love free things and so do students. And so we're going to give away a copy of Kelly's book, The Conscious Creative, to the first person that signed up for today's talk. And that winner is Nina Megardician. Send us a message on Instagram to claim your book, Nina. With that, I would like to take a moment to introduce Kelly Riback Small, founder and COO of creative agency Intents and Purposes and best-selling author of The Conscious Creative, Practical Ethics for Purposeful Work. Kelly is an award-winning creative director, designer, writer, and educator whose career is driven by the pursuit of practical action towards ethical, inclusive, and sustainable futures. With nearly 20 years of leading major projects and brands to proven success, Kelly's driving philosophy is that purposeful work can happen anywhere. Their work centers on providing design direction, strategic creative leadership, ethical design education, and thoughtfully co-created approaches to help clients, practitioners, and students achieve measurable impactful work. A Master of Design graduate and affiliated design researcher with Emily Carr University, Kelly is also a professor of design ethics at George Brown College's School of Design and a mentor with the RGD and OCAD University. Kelly is currently authoring a book about practical ethics for a youth audience to be published by Groundwood Books in 2023. Welcome, Kelly. Moderating the Q&A portion of today's session is graphic design graduating student Mary Gitson. Mary is currently working in editorial design and loves playing with type, which explains her typographically driven body of work. She also believes design can make the world a better place and strives to work on culturally, socially, and environmentally significant projects. Mary's thesis explores the future of graphic design through the lens of biomimicry and provides insights into how designers can learn from nature. When not glued to her laptop, she spends time outdoors, never missing an opportunity to hug a blooming tree or greet a running squirrel. With that, I would like to turn over to Kelly to start their presentation.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Anna Rita, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you. So today we're going to be talking about design ethics, but more for the real world. So we're not talking about like long codes of ethics. You don't have to pledge anything or sign anything at the end of this presentation. It's going to be more of a collection of practical lessons that I've learned as a creative leader and as a researcher and as a human that has had innumerable existential crises as a result of, we'll call it like design's near inextricable ties to capitalism. So I wanted to pass those along to all of you. So let's dig in. So first off, Anna Rita, thank you so much for the amazing introduction. You all know most of this now, but I would just wanted to say, like, feel free to drop me feedback or thoughts on the socials or send me an email. It's all there for you, and I absolutely love to hear folks' feedback on the talk or anything else that you're interested in as it relates to design ethics. So Before we move on, I want to do my own land acknowledgement that I live, work, and play on Trinity Land in what is called the Dish with One Spoon territory. So Toronto, or Tikaronto, is situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Wendat peoples. So I acknowledge these original guardians of the land, and I'm super grateful to have been invited here in the spirit of mutual care and respect. So to start off, I'm going to give you an overview of my career trajectory and really what led me to be more intentional and purposeful in my creative work. As most of us do, I entered the industry wearing rose-tinted glasses. You know, I spent my youth reading Adbusters magazine, if you're familiar, Naomi Klein, and just being critical about the hyper consumerism of the 90s and these thousands of toxic messages that were telling me like who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to move through the world. And so I went into design because I thought, hey, if people are receiving what is now something like 10,000 media messages a day, then I want to be part of crafting those messages and, you know, helping to create a more affirming, sustainable, inclusive culture, you know, because it's that easy. So I became a CD pretty early in my career. I followed the money, as many of us do, and I was working for big brand names that, you know, sounded very exciting to my mom, but resulted in a day-to-day that was moving so fast that I sort of forgot my original, you know, intention for my career. And I was having to hustle harder and, you know, stay quiet when I saw discrimination or brands behaving badly. You know, I was verbally abused in boardrooms when my ideas were considered too out there, and, you know, challenge the status quo of the guys at the top. And I had to fight every day to be recognized and respected, you know, in the same way that, you know, other folks got just by showing up. And for context, I was a creative director when the 3% movement started, and I'm not sure if folks are familiar with it, but at the time, only 3% of all creative directors globally were women. 3%. So it was 12% when I started writing The Conscious Creative, and now it's somewhere around 29%. So that's awesome, but of course there's room to go. So, you know, it's also noteworthy that these stats aren't breaking down intersecting identities like, you know, gender diversity, ethnicity, ability, etc. But, you know, you more or less get the picture that the state of creative leadership diversity was nothing short of abysmal. And so I woke up to the reality of my professional life eventually. I was working in this way that was way outside of my values. And, you know, what that looked like practically was seeing and experiencing, as I mentioned, a ton of discrimination, you know, microaggressions before I knew really what a microaggression was. And those things were especially like vivid and we'll say normalized as they related to my queer identity, not surprisingly. So what felt particularly heavy was my participation in like consumerism as a whole, and that I was selling things that were legitimately harmful for people, for the planet. There was a load of greenwashing happening at the time with a lot of well-known makeup brands. I worked on a sunscreen that was so flammable that people were catching on fire, selling food that was like questionably food. And, you know, overall kind of just strategically manipulating folks to needlessly upgrade their wares, their cars, their phones, so that these corporations could make even more profit while, you know, compromising the planet. And to be honest with you, and I like to be honest about this, is it left me really, really quite messed up. And I was having panic attacks before work, and it was triggering all of these, mental health issues. And it just wasn't tenable. So if you fast forward several years, I finally quit. And it took really the most blatant discrimination of my career and this sort of total loss of fucks given to leave the global agency where I was creative director. I sold everything I owned, and I used that money to go, and I recognize, the privilege of this. I went to do a master's thesis focused on asking the question, is it even possible to have an ethical design practice within problematic systems like capitalism and white supremacy and cissexism? And for me at the time, I had this very absolute notion of ethics that if I was a participant in really anything that was even remotely unethical, then I was automatically an unethical person and an unethical designer and creative. And so I really believed that I was going to have to throw away something like 15 years of career at the time, and all of the contacts and friends in the industry, and honestly, this role that I really loved, in order to do something else I didn't know what that was. So the good news is, of course, that I didn't have to leave the industry. Obviously, I'm still here, but I did need to approach it a little differently. So my research into areas like design for social innovation, sustainability, social impact, ethics, it all resulted in helping me to see the dialectic, that I could hold these sort of two seemingly opposing ideas as true. And I discovered that I could work ethically within a problematic and arguably unethical system that, we all know contributes to things like wealth inequality and climate change and all sorts of social injustices. And there I committed to starting to make small changes, just within my own little tiny sphere of influence. And that was all towards creating a more just and humane industry. And I leaned into this as a practice instead of a destination. So I really don't think any of us ever become immutably ethical one day. But if we practice ethical design, I believe the accumulation of those daily positive decisions, micro decisions, are going to be transformative over time. So I came across this quote in my research. Isn't it better not to walk away from jobs on ethical grounds, but to ask if there's some way that you can have influence? Because the views might not be challenged if you're not the one there to show up. And it was this particular quote that really sort of solidified it for me. It's time to show up. Don't excommunicate yourself from commercial design and from advertising, but instead maybe focus on supporting other folks who are struggling with the same issues. And so I have to mention that I'm really grateful to House of Anansi Press, who published The Conscious Creative. It is the culmination of all of that, my research, my career crisis, and it has become this collection of over 100 practical actions for ethical work and for subverting from within spaces that, frankly, aren't always perfect, and that's the reality. I also learned that lots of folks want to see a better industry too. So first off, huge congratulations to everybody who's graduating. Amazing. Also, you're the first generation to prioritize purpose over money. And honestly, we could all stand to learn from you. I spent most of my young career chasing a big salary because I was led to believe that my success and my worth were entirely dictated by that number. And that is a dangerous lie. So now, thankfully, almost 80% of people prefer to actually work for a purpose-driven organization. Things are really starting to change. And studies have shown that purposeful people actually live longer, healthier lives. And I can't disagree with that, because when I was working way outside of my values, it left me feeling like garbage, like immunocompromised, depressed, anxious. And it has been entirely worth the upheaval of overhauling my professional life to find what has been a more sustainable way to work. And, people are even leaving their jobs to find more intentional ways of working. That's something that has really changed. And we've all seen that in the Great Resignation, right? Which has been a collective movement of really prioritizing ourselves and each other, our health, our well-being, and really choosing to integrate our personal values with our professional lives, and realizing how damaging it can be to start denying parts of ourselves in exchange for a paycheck. So many of us are, demanding something different and better and more just and accessible and inclusive of everyone, actually everyone. And, also, those are really big, popular ideas right now that can and have been appropriated as buzzwords, or see it a lot as selling propositions for folks who want to capitalize on a shift in culture without actually doing the work. And what I see is that can make it really hard to know where to start if you are someone who genuinely wants to affect some positive change in the world. So what I'm going to share next are a series of lessons learned, mostly the hard way, in hopes of supporting folks out there who want to make a bit of a shift toward more purposeful work. We'll kick it off here. Put your own oxygen mask on first. The little safety card in the grimy seat pocket on an airplane that's, in case of emergency, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help any children or anybody else. I've really realized that is a profound life lesson. And, you can call it self-care if that resonates with you. The reality in life and in business is that if you're not caring for yourself in all of the most essential ways, you're never going to have the fortitude and the energy it requires to do the daily work of taking mindful, incremental action to do things like, say, champion belonging, fight for more inclusive research, or, you could challenge your organization to think more about the holistic impacts of your projects and not just the bottom line. So another big one, commit to incremental change. It can become extremely overwhelming to really, really look at the problems facing the industry and society as a whole. I mean, if we look at the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them. They cover things like climate change and poverty, gender equality, education, conflict, justice. These are the most wicked problems facing the world, and none of us can correct them alone or in one fell swoop. I believe that it really is only by participating as a global collective and, impacting our little worlds one action at a time that we can start to transform all of it. And importantly, this isn't meant to challenge the idea of collective action or protest. I think those things are, of course, crucial as well. But for me, when I'm talking about professional change, it's a little bit different. And in the spirit of having to put on your own oxygen masks first, we're in a system that requires us to make money in order to have our basic needs met. So we have to find ways of subverting from within these systems. Most of us don't have the power or the financial backing to make big, radical, or anarchistic type choices when it comes to our work. So to me, incremental change is this safe and viable approach to beginning an ethical practice. So this one won't be a surprise after the quote I shared about showing up even in the face of a potentially unethical project or client. I do believe that purposeful work can happen anywhere if we're looking through that lens of celebrating incremental positive changes. So, we can consider that, we might think beyond the practical design work sometimes and impact things like changing hiring practices or the way that your colleagues are treated, or even the way your company or business offsets its carbon use or its environmental practices. Like, they could only host with green hosting services because we now know that data farms produce as much CO2 as the entire airline industry globally, which is no joke. And all of this to say, one of the actions in the book is also to define your hard no. Maybe you will refuse to work for a tobacco or a firearms company. And I deeply respect that. And also, I won't ever judge your choices, because at the end of the day, we all have to keep buying food. I would say that this is one of the most straightforward, immediately implementable methods of immersing yourself in the world of ethical design is go find your allies. Go find other people who care about the same stuff you do. Join design clubs, professional associations, and follow stuff in the media that matters to you. There's one of my favorites is Your Undivided Attention podcast and the Center for Humane Technology. I'm a member of the Queer Design Club. You can check out the Black Designers of Canada. We can curate our feeds to reflect the things that really matter the most to us, and even consider doing a little bit of media tourism. Go into spaces and respectfully engage in these pockets and worlds that are unfamiliar, maybe even a little uncomfortable. You can find folks on LinkedIn who are doing work that you are really inspired by. Make those connections, join the Discord servers and the Slack channels about things like accessibility and inclusive design. And, when it's safe to go attend IRL talks and lectures, go and do that. And you can support causes you're passionate about. And I really do believe, and for me, this action alone transformed a lot. So moving along, fuck professionalism. And here's why. So professionalism as we know it is deeply rooted in white supremacy, ableism, and cis heteropatriarchy. So I would challenge folks to go talk to anyone who lives with a disability, who, isn't white and straight and cis, and just ask them how comfortable they are showing up as their authentic selves in the workplace. Black folks overwhelmingly have to do something called code switching. And code switching is about adjusting how a person speaks, their appearance, behavior, any sort of personal expression in exchange for being treated fairly and getting decent service or protecting their employment. It can also look like marginalized folks having to present as quote unquote more professional than their, say, cis white male counterparts in order to be perceived as worthy of a role. So I hope that, the next time, someone makes a value judgment about your or someone else's so-called professionalism, that, maybe you'll challenge it. You'll ask them what that really means to them, and just pick it apart a little bit. And while we're at it, I would like to say, fuck the binaries too. When we move away from binary thinking, it can change our capacity for impact. I think it's just like, acknowledging that any of us can practice design in ways that are both ethical and unethical. There's no such thing as absolute good and bad. So let's try to find the nuance in our work. Practically speaking, you can try dropping binary language, avoiding absolute claims, not categorizing all humans into male or female, because biologically that's not even real. We know now that life is not binary, so our creative work and our language really shouldn't be either. This one's big. Simply showing up as your true and authentic self, of course, when it's safe to do that, can change people's lives. I, for one, spent a lot of years trying to hide who I was and how I need to show up in the world to feel seen, because I didn't feel it was acceptable and I didn't see it reflected anywhere. And, not only was that terrible for my mental health and overall sense of self-worth, but I also wasn't doing anything to help other people feel safe showing up as their authentic selves. So by conforming to dominant culture, I was actually amplifying these erroneous ideas about how we're all supposed to look and act. And sometimes simply showing up and confidently being ourselves can be a radical act of love to our communities. And plus, design is the antithesis of conformity. Like, nobody can design the way you design. And I want to see everything that, you bring to the table, not all of the stuff that's already been done and I've already seen. Rude, right? I know I'm sort of speaking ill of human-centered design's golden child. And of course, I have nothing against empathy, but I do think that in design, we have to approach it really critically. So I've been reading a lot around the dark side of empathy in design, and that this over-reliance on empathizing can actually result in designers projecting their own assumptions onto the experience of others. And this is particularly dangerous when we're, doing design for social impact, designing with communities that have been marginalized historically, these sorts of things. And, some have written that it actually reinforces colonial practices in design. So reinforces things like Eurocentrism, white centrism, or evaluating the quality of design work based on white European values and sensibilities. And so we know this is not something design needs any more of. So let's work to dismantle that. And so the alternative to an over-reliance on empathizing or trying to put ourselves in someone's lived experience that we can, never truly understand outside of the lens of our own experiences. The answer is, it's making sure we're not the only ones who are designing. Co-design, co-creation, participatory design, user-led design. As designers, I think it's time to decenter ourselves and forget this idea that we are the omnipotent design experts in the room. We always have to remember we need to design with people and not for people. And, the communities that may benefit from the work have to be stakeholders with power and with influence. And where power imbalances between participants and designers really have to be dismantled for what will be more authentic, appropriate storytelling and interventions. So I've nodded to this one a few times, but it definitely deserves its own slide. So to decolonize design is to stop centering white or Eurocentric thinking in design. So I would challenge folks to try and think of the names of some of the most widely known thinkers in graphic design, I would say especially historically. You know, do they have something in common? Also try Googling famous graphic designers and then ask the same question. And I say this with respect for the work of the white men who have dominated our industry, but with this intense curiosity and a hunger to experience design through a different lens, through all of the different lenses. Dr. Dory Tunstall is, she's an incredible leader in decolonizing design, and wanted to share some of her advice that includes things like unlearning that good design only means design by white designers. She's challenged that we can dismantle a hierarchy of style and reclassify traditional craft as a key part of design history. You know, we can think about how people of different ethnicities and lived experiences might identify with our work before we put it out into the world. You can consider passing on a project where you don't identify with the lived experience of that particular audience and instead refer somebody more appropriate. And, you know, importantly, I think we can realize that with every design choice made, there's this potential to exclude or oppress others. So I recommend digging deeper into her work. I believe she has a book called Decolonizing Design that's about to drop or has just dropped, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. So in the 90s, philosopher of technology, this guy named Neil Postman, he called new technology something of a Faustian bargain, like a deal with the devil. He said that technology giveth and taketh away. And then about a decade later, this design philosopher named Tony Fry asked, you know, does what we create justify what we destroy? And he talked a lot about how the act of creation has to necessitate some sort of destruction. And so I've borrowed this thinking to design a bit of a mantra to remind myself that when I create, to do it mindfully, because design giveth and design taketh away. So I'd love to see us challenge ourselves to design in moderation, design more lightly so that we can avoid any of that destruction or minimize the destruction. And it can be a privilege to design ethically. This is crucial to remember, you know, to have a choice to say no to a project or even have the time or the energy to do that additional labor that it takes to start to affect change. You know, the lesson here is that ethical design practice has to be a design practice without judgment. And that includes of others and of ourselves. I don't think any of us can truly know the challenges and experiences of the people around us. So I'll say, just please be kind. And so I'll leave you with this. It's with acts of attention that we decide who to hear, who to see, and who in our world has agency. And in this way, attention forms the ground, not just for love, but for ethics. So much about working in ways that align with our values is about being mindful and intentional about our behavior, our biases, and where we focus our attention. So don't discount the power of simply remembering what matters to you and what you value as you go about your work days. And once we've set an intention to do better in a reasonable and even a gentle way that includes care for ourselves and for the life and the people around us, the rest will fall into place. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for this very inspiring and insightful conversation. It was amazing. It seems to me like such a beautiful and succinct summary of the conscious creative, but in a couple of slides in a digital format. So it was really cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
I have a couple of questions for you. I'm sure we'll have some questions in the chat as well. So whoever is watching, please put the questions in the chat. We have lots of time to answer them. The first question that I wanted to ask is pertaining to the junior designers, because all of us are. So now when we are entering the workplace, we will for sure encounter a lot of this ethical dilemmas in our professional. I'm not even sure if it's right to say professional now. Right?
You can say professional.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are sometimes situations when you want to propose some kind of a change, or you want to create impact in one aspect or another of your work, but there's sometimes this weight of self-doubt that that wouldn't be adopted or you wouldn't be listened to because you don't really have enough of say in the decision-making process. So would you have any advice on that? Maybe some kind of words of encouragement or something like that?
Yeah, I can certainly do my best. I mean, it's such a good question, because I think we all face that, even, you know, regardless of whether you're junior, intermediate, senior. Yeah. It can be really challenging to affect that change. And I think, you know, the first place my mind goes is that through identifying and connecting with your allies in the workplace, building a collective of people who share your values and want to see that change, there is power in numbers. This is why collective action works. And so I think in a gentle and, you know, a way that is not going to compromise, like I say in the book, like your ability to buy lunch, you know, go for it. Find your people, make your requests, and that can be a lot stronger than a single person coming to them. The other thing is, don't necessarily, like the rest of the conversation about like not being able to affect massive change in one fell swoop also applies to the workplace. So maybe you want to change something that is like, you know, very top down. You have to get to the CEO. You really want to make this like, you know, system level change, institutional change. Start with your best friend at work. Have a conversation about it. See and ask, what are the things that I can change in my immediate sphere of influence, maybe in the design studio, in and of itself. And then we can use that as a proof of concept. And then we can bring it to a different department and continue to sort of move it up the ladder. So I think one of the hardest lessons in doing this work for me has been to learn patience, because I'm a deeply impatient person. So I think have patience with it. You know, the change doesn't have to happen overnight, and try not to become discouraged if it takes some time. Celebrate the small wins.
Fantastic answer. Yeah, it's definitely a very long, laborious process, and takes a lot of patience, which we don't have sometimes, and it's totally normal, I think.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have one more, and then we'll go to the questions in the chat. So you talked about decolonizing design, and I love that, and dismantling like various systems of oppression in our design practice. I know that there's a lot of conversation about that happening in terms of functionality of design, in terms of representation in the boardrooms, for example. But I wanted to talk about the visual aspects of design work as well. So what I'm referring here to is that, for example, as a design graduate, I'm very much influenced by the modern modernist notions of design, in terms of grids, typography, layouts. The list goes on. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. So I was wondering if you have any tips, again, or advice on how to subvert that in your visual practice, not only in conceptually thinking about it.
Yeah, it's that's another really great question. So just for the record, I also like love modernist work. I love it.
I know.
love modernist typography. I'm a sucker for it. I can't help myself. So and also that's what I was raised on.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the sort of the offsetting of that and the dominance of some of these really Eurocentric lenses on design is to seek out different people, different ethnicities, like get global, like look at the design work that's coming out of, pick a country and look to that for influence. I think, when we say it can be a bit of an uphill climb for these things, it means adding just like a little bit more work, because, if you go to the usual suspects, like I love Dribble and the like for inspiration, you're not always going to see as diverse a set of influences, because, we'll say like the Western world is largely impacted by modernist influence. So look a little bit harder, read books. There's a great book that just came out called The Black Experience in Design. I'm just looking at it on my bookshelf. Highly recommend. It shares the name with a 1963 article that came out in Print magazine that was for the first time ever featuring this group of, I think, 5 or 6 Black designers and talking about the challenges of being in this very white dominated space, and looking at, their work through a different sort of cultural lens. And it's there are far too few of those. And when we look at, that was in the 60s, and we look at today, there are a lot of thinkers who are saying, not enough has changed since then. And so I think, like I mentioned in the presentation, it's those daily micro decisions. Got a project, I've just received the brief, and it's time to start to do my discovery. And I want to get influenced by something a little bit different. And so seek, because it's out there. Yeah,
definitely. It pretty much ties back into the idea of media tourism that you mentioned before. So just exploring what ideas are out there, what concepts people are pitching and implementing in their practice is crucial for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
We have a great question from Virginia, who's asking, how do you preserve yourself, your mind, your heart, your body, etc., when showing up often means absorbing so much of hot mess in order to support and protect others?
Such a great question. Thanks, Virginia. Well, I think this comes from really good boundaries with time that I'm on and time that I'm off. And, it can be very hard to create those boundaries and sort of step away to do the things that I know, and I know they're different for everybody, that will sort of fill my cup back up after, working on some of these things. So for me, it's, having hard cutoffs. I go for a lot of walks. I stand under trees, I play with my dog. Like I think they come from the simple things that we have to ask ourselves, like what gives us joy and what fills us up. And I mean, some of this work also fills me up. Like it really does. It can be, it was a lot more challenging, I think, when I was in the commercial industry prior to now, when I was doing kind of that uphill battle and thinking that like, oh my God, all of this is such a mess, and not having any sort of clear pathway forward, and now that I know that I'm being gentle with myself and being non-judgmental when I have to participate in something that is, less than perfect, I'm not beating myself up anymore. So I think a lot of it is attitudinal toward ourselves, and also just involves the usual kind of, self-care of doing the things that are good for you, being with your people,
Yeah, 100%. Nothing else to add really to it. Okay, let's take one more question from the audience, from Arjit, who's saying that now that you do more meaningful work, would you still say that you have days when you think you're not doing quoted enough? How do you eliminate that feeling if your conscious knows you could do more?
Thanks, Arjit. Yes, yeah, I do, but less and less, because I have learned over, like, again, the hard way, that I need to be very gentle on myself in this space. I mean, all of us are stuck in this system that can be extremely challenging simply to move through, let alone adding, this sort of mission on top of things. And so when I think to myself that I am not doing enough, or, feeling questionable about something that I'm working on, for the most part, I will do my best to forgive myself and be kind to myself. And also, I am very, very fortunate that at this stage in my career, I have been able to curate a little bit more of what I'm working on. And so that is happening less and less. But I put in my time with it. And also, we all will at some point. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I can't stress enough the lack of judgment. You have to build your portfolio, and you have to get the experience. And some of that experience is going to have to be, this is what I don't want in my life, right? But it's all experience. And I always say to myself, like, it's good information. Listen to your body, listen to the anxiety. It will show up when you are working outside of your values. And instead of being like, oh shit, this feels terrible and running away from it, like, look at it. Okay, that is telling me something really, really important about what is good for me and what isn't. That's something that I've learned as sort of being one of the most helpful.
Amazing. And I guess having your allies by your side also helps, because then you're doing it all together, right? And you have each other's backs, which matters lots.
It does. Folks like you.
Thank you, Kelly. Folks like you as well. We have a question about design education, which we found really interesting. Jasmine says, hi, Kelly, super inspiring talk. How do you think the educational landscape could improve to be more ethical?
Hey, thanks, Jasmine. How do I think the educational landscape? Well, I mean, the easy answer is that I think we need to be immersed in design ethics, and just ethics as a whole, from day one of starting in this industry. Like, we are responsible for crafting the messages. Like I said, there are about 10,000 messages that every single one of us gets hit with every day. And that's a lot. And so that's a huge responsibility also. And I don't think we talk about that responsibility enough. So I would love to see, and I'm so, grateful to George Brown for, bringing me on to design this design ethics course. It's been, it's been a dream, truly. And also I would love to see, instead of sort of just like one comprehensive course, like, what does design ethics 101 look like in first year? And what does 102 look like? And right? So I think maybe if students are given the opportunity to learn in smaller chunks as it relates to, each stage of their education, I feel like that's going to be something that really transforms the next gen coming out of school. So I think that's the biggest thing right off the top, just more discourse and more intentional choices around including all of that.
I love it, especially about incorporating these little chunks of information, gradually integrating it into your curriculum. It's fantastic. To everyone who's watching from second year, make sure to take the design ethics elective in the third year. It's a little promo time here as well. I think we have around 5 minutes left, so I'm going to switch to a concluding question, so to say. I was wondering if you have any kind of dream projects with an ethics edge to it, maybe that you would love to work on. So maybe we could have this imagination minute for a second.
Oh my God, that's so fun. Okay, I love that question. What is the dream? I mean, first off, I think any project can be infused with ethics. So I think I really do believe purposeful work can happen anywhere. And we don't necessarily have to go after a project that is focused on ethics. But if say, I think for me, it would be working on like a global initiative around LGBTQIA plus rights. I love to work on so many different causes, and many are close to my heart, but not quite as close to my heart as that one is. And so there's, I think, a real magic that happens when there's a personal connection to the work. And I don't even necessarily know what that is. And you know what, right now I'm actually working on a project for a negative emission technology company that has innovated this basically the eighth. There were formerly only 7 ways of taking carbon out of the atmosphere, and they've discovered this eighth. Amazing scientists. And so I'm helping them to make this world ready, like market ready, getting people to buy their carbon credits, and just really helping to spread the news and the message about this like incredible nature-based technology. And so I have to say, like, that's pretty close to a dream project as well. So I'm very grateful for that one as well.
Fantastic. Great answer, as every other answer that you gave us today.
Thanks, Mary.
Could we pull out a little comment of Krista, who doesn't have a question, but has a very sweet message. She says, not a question, but Kelly, I'm so proud of and inspired by you. It was so wonderful to hear you speak this morning. Thank you for sharing your experience and insights.
Thanks, Krista.
Pretty much summarizes all our thoughts right now. They also say, GBC grads, I look forward to hearing about all of the exciting things ahead and your accomplishments in the months and years to come. Congratulations, in caps.
Indeed. Congratulations to everybody.
Well, I guess that's pretty much the end of our talk. So again, I want to thank you, Kelly, for making the time to come and share your expertise and your energy with us. Definitely more and more designers are more curious about how to create with accessibility, inclusivity, and regeneration in mind. So we're very grateful for you coming here today and giving us this little nuggets of wisdom, of ethical wisdom. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. A little, again, promo minute here. Join us at 1 p.m. for our panel discussion on design at the intersection of accessibility and inclusion. If you love this talk, I'm 100% sure that you will enjoy this panel as well. And also make sure to check out our Yes Marketplace with exclusive Yes merch at the Yes website. thank you everyone again for joining, and thank you so much, Kelly, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.